Through today's proclamation, we will share details about a well-known Bible story from the Gospel of John, the woman at the well. If you don't know the story, don't worry, we will be telling it as we go. The story begins with a Samaritan woman from Galilee. The premise of this story is one that moves from brokenness to restoration. I drew the short straw, and my task is to share the somewhat sad part of the story. This particular woman had been married to 5 different husbands, and the man that she lived with at the time was not her husband. Even by today's standards, this lifestyle will get an eyebrow raise from many. Why did she have 5 husbands? We don't know. She could have been divorced, which wouldn't have been her decision, or maybe even had some or all of her husbands die. What we know is that no matter what had happened in her past, it was for sure emotionally scarring. Not only did she most likely feel depression from the separation from 5 different husbands, she also felt it from her community. She was constantly shunned and avoided. Her past and her present were without hope. This poor Samaritan woman was broken. But what does it mean to be broken? Dictionary.com defines broken as not working properly or separated into parts or pieces by being hit, damaged, etc. When we are separated from God, we are not able to work properly. There are many ways to feel broken or be considered broken. What about the homeless man on the side of the street that can be found asking for spare change throughout the night? What about the kid who is considering committing suicide? What about the mother who has lost her child? Or the student who feels like an outsider at Sunday school? What about the senior that struggles on a Saturday night to find the words for their sermon? What we often forget is that brokenness isn't just a personal experience. It's relational. It's communal. When one of us experiences brokenness, we all bear the effects. For example, when my brother and I were in 6th grade and first started coming to youth group, we didn't feel a part of the group. It had seemed as if everyone there already had their own friends and their own groups to hang out with. We felt isolated. We experienced brokenness. Yet now, I can honestly say the relationships I've built here at the church and in our youth group have been the most incredible ones of my life. In the same place where I used to feel left out, I now feel at home. So what changed? I experienced God at work, see older youth who wanted to share their faith with me. They encouraged me to come to church until I no longer felt isolated. This church has not just been a place in which I made a few friends. It is the home of my second family. But not only has the youth group helped me build relationships with friends, it has helped me to see God. I've seen God on our mission trips through the kindness and bonding expressed to mere strangers. I felt his presence when singing the song Sanctuary as we begin our worship at our Garden City Beach retreat. I know God is there. However, I was not the only one to benefit from my escape from brokenness. Inside the youth group, we can see God through the actions of each other. Just as my friends and the youth counselors have allowed me to see and feel God, I know they have also been able to see God in me. Moving from brokenness to restoration is no easy task. So what is it exactly that can get us there? Or rather, who is it that can get us there?
Have you ever heard the phrase, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink? Sometimes, if you're the one leading, it can be frustrating to go through all the trouble of getting them to just the right point in their lives, only to have that someone not willing to help themselves or accept any help at all. The phrase leaves out a critical step for that poor old horse. The horse has to actually be thirsty to be aware enough to know that drinking water is a must. The woman at the well knew she was thirsty. She knew she was broken. She knew she was alienated from the rest of her community. Why else would she endure the brutal midday sun to haul water back to her home? Yet Jesus came to her in the heat of the day. What if Jesus would have passed by in the cool early morning when most women filled up their water jugs? He would have had a bigger audience, after all. But somehow he knew that the woman who came to the well at noon not only needed him most, but she had a heart that was willing to drink. In first century Judaism, men would never have been left alone with a woman, let alone a Samaritan woman. This could have been considered cheating and ruin the reputation of the man. And the ongoing feud between the Samaritans and Jews over claim to the land made their interaction even more intense. Jesus didn't just strike up a conversation, he asked for water, meaning he would need her cup to drink from. Even nowadays, people don't always feel comfortable sharing drinks. He drank from the Samaritan's cup, not worrying about reputation, diseases, or anything else she had. Again, this made their encounter all the more out of the norm for the Samaritan woman. But Jesus was never afraid to take risks with people. He reaches out to everyone, comforts everyone, and loves everyone. In verses 13 and 14 in John's Gospel, Jesus said, "Everyone who drinks this water will be thirsty again, but whoever drinks the water I give them will never thirst. Indeed, the water I give them will become in them a spring of water welling up to eternal life." Jesus brings us from a place of brokenness to a place of wholeness. In fact, Jesus acts as a bridge of sorts. But in order to cross that bridge, we have to accept the fact that the bridge is going over a place we simply cannot go through. The Samaritan woman had clearly tried to go through some tough times in her life, but without. As Jesus tries to help her find the bridge, she deflects and tries to change the conversation. How many of us get defensive and deflect when we feel uncomfortable? The woman did what a lot of us do, and did what she could to get herself out of the hot seat. She asked Jesus which mountain was the truly holy mountain, Mount Gerizim, where the Samaritans worshipped, or Mount Zion, where the Jews worshipped. God's holy mountain, the place of worship, the church, is different from God. God's offer is for us to move from stale water to moving water, from being thirsty to feeling quenched. Jesus simply asked for a drink from the well, and in doing so, gave her a purpose, which let her know she was valued. This led to an even bigger purpose. That outcast woman at the well was the first person Jesus revealed himself to as the Messiah. She wasn't the woman who went through 5 husbands anymore. She was the woman who had the courage and strength to face the community that shunned her in order to preach about the humble man that saved her. So what does all of this have to do with Lent? Many people give up something, or may even add something to their daily routine for Lent. This gives us an opportunity to practice discipline and think about what Jesus ultimately did for us on the cross. Maureen McCann Waldron says it best when she says, "Jesus shows us who we really are, not who we want to be, but who we are, imperfect, crabby, selfish, and utterly lovable in God's eyes."
Adele, one of the most awarded singer-songwriters in pop culture today, has a song called Water Under the Bridge. In it, she sings about how desperately wants to know that the feelings between her and her great love aren't really over. How the relationship can't possibly be water under the bridge. But what if this is exactly what Jesus is asking us to do? What if the brokenness of past relationships should be water under the bridge? Certainly, the woman at the well came to this realization when the disciples showed back up at the well, and she took off to go back to the village to share her discovery. See, she knew she had been restored. As the youngest of 3 sisters, I sometimes felt left out of the group. My middle sister and I got along pretty well, but my older sister and I used to fight a lot. We were very different. I played basketball and enjoyed hanging out with my friends. She wasn't interested in sports and was more of a homebody. I wanted to be accepted by her, but we didn't talk much. She was a good student and didn't have to study much either. I struggled more in school and was later diagnosed with dyslexia. I was envious of how easy school was for her. Later, I learned she was jealous how easily I made friends. She grew up and went to high school, and she and my middle sister were closer in age, so they did things socially together. I still felt left out. I really wanted to have a closer relationship, but we couldn't seem to get along. We always ended up saying mean things to one another. But it wasn't until my dad's plane crash that we realized we could have lost our dad that day, and all the negative energy we thought about each other wasn't important anymore. We knew we needed to let these emotions become water under the bridge. We went together to greet my dad that day. We learned an important lesson about your family is your priority. No matter what, you have each other's back. When Jesus came up to Jacob's well that day and asked the Samaritan woman for the water, she questioned Jesus. She didn't know he was the Messiah. She asked him, "How can you ask me for a drink?" Jesus took the opportunity to share with her about God and the real power of the living water. Not the water from the well, but believing that Jesus is the long-awaited Messiah. At first, she questioned him on the literal way to get the water, so Jesus had to give her a way to understand that the water she drew every day at Jacob's well will be a short-term fix for thirst. But the living water he would give her, she would never be thirsty again, because it was eternal water. It was then when she started to understand. But Jesus asked her to bring her husband to the well, knowing that she didn't have one. See, the man she was living with and not her husband was her sin. And Jesus wanted her to bring her sin to him so she could repent and be restored and start to drink the living water he gives. It was then when he realized himself to her and she realized that he is the Messiah. The woman then leaves a jar of water she had and went to tell all the people in the town that Messiah is here. She left the water behind because she realized that Jesus forgave her sin, which was represented by the water. Her old life and her life was stored in him, the living water. It has been a slow process, but me and my sister and I now connect through social media. We send funny Snapchats and texts to each other. She planned a really special surprise for my 18th birthday and supports me by coming to my basketball games. Now that I am about to graduate high school, we will have more things in common socially and do more things socially together. My relationship with my sister started to be restored when we both realized that the way we had been treating each other wasn't the way that God wanted us to live. We were sharing the good news about the living water with everyone when we argued. God can use our experiences to teach us lessons when we take the time to listen. This is what we can do during Lent. We can take the time to meet Jesus at the well and listen. Jesus came to Jacob's well that day not because he was physically thirsty. He came to restore a sinful soul. While the plane crash was a terrible experience for everyone involved, God still used it for the good. God used this miracle to restore our family so we can leave our old stale water behind and start something new.